she's falling. I was ready to jump up.
That's an old people thing. If you fall and people laugh, you're young, and if you fall and people get up. Sorry.
Would you rather me laugh? Just kidding.
No, I expect you to run.
I don't think you want me to do that.
Okay, good afternoon. We're going to call to order a public hearing regarding the presentation of targeted improvement plans for identified campuses.
Good afternoon. Thank you for giving me the time to speak with you this afternoon. Texas Education Agency has held in place all prior plans from 2019 and are continuing them this year since we were unable to have a STAR assessment. So you might recall this presentation from this time last year where we went over targeted improvement plans for those campuses. We're required to do so again this year even though the plans are in continuation in terms of TEA's perception of them. So just a quick review. In 2019, the district ended the accountability year with a 79.3, which was 5 points up from the 2018 school year. Remember, domain and all those 4 points are more than 5 actual performance points. There are a lot of indicators that go into it. And since there was no accountability in 2020, everything has continued. So any campus that had any type of area to improve on according to TEA needed to continue those plans this year. So brief history. We used to have different types of accountability, interventions, and support structures in Texas over the years. In the past 5 years, we've had 3 different programs from TEA to help schools. At one point, it was the TASE system, Texas Accountability Intervention System, and there was a whole series of plans that went with that. Then they switched to just simply targeted improvement plans. And now we're currently under, as of last year, the Effective Schools Framework, which really focuses on what are those things that schools should be doing to build the most capacity in the adults to make the difference for students in terms of outcomes. So even the language and what schools are asked to look at changes under the Effective Schools Framework. So a brief overview of the timeline. Everything has been continuing from last year with the TEA plans that we've been working on with our campuses. And you'll note that some of those are required to be, they could be a targeted improvement plan framework, or they could be just embedded in their campus improvement plans, which are also on the board's agenda for today. But over the course of the year, there'll be interactions with Texas Education Agency and also with Region 6, who is our partner in supporting these schools, where we'll submit progress and how it's going all throughout the year. And then ultimately in June, we submit our final report and we wait for our assessment results from STAR. So the Effective Schools Framework is really structured around 5 prioritized levers with, I think it's 13, I might be miscounting, essential actions. And so these are the things that campuses look at. They look at what are the things in our school that if we had to move one of these levers would be the biggest possible outcome in positive student performance. And so as a team, they look at all of their data, they work with their community, they get stakeholder feedback, and then they select the levers and the essential actions that they feel like are the biggest growth points for their campus in terms of making a difference for students. So again, the Effective Schools Framework really focuses on what are the adults going to do to support students and what will look differently. So last year, our campuses that are participating in some aspects of this process chose the following essential actions. And you can see the vast majority are focusing on what you would hope they would be looking at. Data-driven instruction, and it's really data-informed instruction, right? How do I know what's going on? How do I know that temperature check of how the student's performing so that I can best support them? And then also writing quality lessons to correspond with that information. And so most campuses are really focusing on those 2 things and really putting in that professional learning community at the campus level. They did so last year. We saw tremendous progress prior to the pandemic. So we're hopeful that that good work will continue under this current year and that we'll start to see, it's more important than ever, quite frankly, to have that itemized data-driven instruction down to the student level so you know what the kids' needs are right now, which is why you see all the beginning of the year screeners and the district-based assessments, all sorts of indicators to help us know where are our kids now and then how do we need to write lessons differently to support where they currently are. The support structures in place for these campuses will also continue. That is the district coordinator for school improvement for all of the campuses. Mrs. Goodman and Dr. Merrill work directly with those campus principals and those teams to be boots on the ground, walking classrooms, helping support teachers. We also have teams from central office that go over and support with instruction. And then Region 6 even comes over and provides training and support to these campuses as part of an agreement. And then, of course, whatever the campus needs, the district also provides support as needed. So that is the process for targeted improvement plans. And again, this part of it is, well, what do you expect to get from doing all of this? Well, of course, we hope that we'll continue to see an uphill march in terms of academic performance, and that we'll hopefully see these campuses score in a manner that they no longer need to continue in these processes. That the structures are there, the processes are in there, and the kids are performing as we move forward with this accountability here. Knowing that it is quite unknown in terms of what that might look like this year. But the work is still the work. Where is the student performing, and how do we keep moving them forward? Are there any questions? I know that's a very short presentation for a whole lot of detail in terms of improvement planning, but it is a continuation of the prior year.
Just one question. So
Ma'am.
the campuses that were on this list, it wasn't their overall score. It could just be on specific domains.
Correct. It could be a singular domain. It was not the overall score necessarily. And in fact, any domain, and even though it wasn't maybe used 2A, 2B, it would still have to be considered.
Right.
You could have an overall performance of a B and still be here.
And what's the anticipation of what happened in spring versus moving to remote learning, and what's happening this fall where we have all these different scenarios? Do we think that we'll probably get where we need to be on these?
I think part of the complexity of that question is identifying where students currently are. There are of course hurdles with knowing where they left last year, and then we always think about a summer slide, and now it's a longer period of time. There's also a lot of unknown in terms of what assessments will look like from the state of Texas this spring. I know that they're doing everything they can, and they're actively working in PLCs with student level data. There are some data sets that they need to work more with kids to be able to assess them.
That was my main point, is that we are looking at where we were really at the end of 2019.
Correct.
For right now.
And at that point, things were looking well.
Right.
Things looked well.
Right.
But we'll have to see. It's all about where the kid currently is and how do we move them forward to meet that measure.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
What you described as one of the most commonly discussed items among superintendents across the state is everyone is concerned about gaps and lack of accessibility in certain regions, and how will we make all that up when we get past this point of getting somewhat into more normalcy. What will that look like in terms of remediation, in terms of intensified support? And we've talked about that here as well on our team. So
We're thrilled to have more students back versus in the second 6 weeks so that we can provide more direct support to them. And we hope that continues.
Thank you.
If there's no additional questions, there's no questions to the public hearing, so anybody that is here may address the speaker as well. I'm not seeing any questions. If there's no additional questions, we will adjourn the open public hearing.
Thank you.
All right. I call this workshop of the Bryan Independent School District to order. Let the record show that a quorum of board members is present, and this workshop has been duly called, and that notice of this workshop has been posted in accordance with the Texas Open Meeting Act, Texas Government Code Chapter 551. At this time, we have any citizens' comments. We have no citizens' comments, so with that, we will go right down into information items. 1, discuss construction and delivery methods.
So today we brought Ron Bailey in with PBK. As you all know, PBK was selected for the firms to build the new intermediate number 3 in the transportation maintenance facility. And part of this, we're looking at going a different route on procurement versus competitive seal proposal to a construction manager at risk. And Ron is here today to kind of give y'all an overview of the differences between those two procurement methods.
Thank you. ago. So I do have just a small PowerPoint to kind of use as a guide. Good morning or good afternoon. We're kind of right in the middle of that. Just want to spend a few moments and talk a little bit about delivery methods, specifically for these two projects, though, the 5-6 building and the maintenance transportation. As I know you know, the maintenance transportation facility is going to be relocated onto another piece of property, and the 5-6 building will be built on their existing property where they're located now. I bring that up because that shows you right there there's a lot of phasing that's going to be necessary. When one is demolished, how quickly can we start the 5-6 building? And then at the same time building the new maintenance transportation. So there's a lot of trigger work in there that makes it worth considering a different type of delivery method. The state of Texas,
Working for you, Ron?
nope, there we go. So we're gonna look at two in particular. One called a competitive seal proposal, which is a CSP. We'll use for short. The other one, the construction manager at risk, which is CMAR. The state of Texas actually allows 7 delivery methods for school districts to select when they pick or when they build certain buildings. Each delivery method has their value, and it really does depend upon the type of project that we're using. So first, let's just talk a little bit about competitive seal proposals. That is one of the 7 delivery methods. It's very similar to what I'm going to say is the old traditional way of a hard bid or just a competitive bidding. That was used for decades before the state modified it to allow other delivery methods to be used. And in essence, in a hard bid, the process is you would hire an architect, design the building, draw it up, put it out to bid, and then whoever was the low bidder, they pretty much got the project. You were not able to negotiate with them. And it could actually be a contractor that you could even be in a lawsuit with on another project. But if they were low, you pretty much had to use them. There were some extenuating circumstances where you would be able to bypass them. But so hard bid had some issues with just regard to school districts. You could not select a contractor on their reputation or the quality of the work. It pretty much had to be on price. The way the form that it occurred, like I mentioned before, you're the school district, you're the client, you would hire the architect. Architect would work on the design, do the drawings, put it out to bid, and the general contractor would be hired. And then all the subcontractor contracts would be handled by the general contractor. CSP, the main difference between CSP and a hard bid is that now you are able to pick and choose a little bit more with regards to their qualifications. Not only their price, but also their reputation and their qualifications. The way in which you do that using a competitive seal proposal is that you establish grading criteria up front in the specifications so that everybody knows, all the contractors interested knows how they'll be graded. And then that allows you to a little more flexibility on picking and choosing. Some of the pros and cons of CSP is, I just mentioned it, you're able to base it on qualifications and reputation. You can do some negotiations prior to awarding it. And it also is just kind of a common delivery method. Since it's so close to the hard bid method, everybody's familiar with it and is kind of aware of how it works. Some of the disadvantages is that because of the process I mentioned, we design the project, we draw it up, put it out to bid. You have to have all that in place before you would hire a CSP, meaning that there's no assistance in pricing or anything else up front. If prices should come in not where they should be, then you have to step back and rework the drawings and put it out to bid again and so on until it gets to where it needs to be. Another thing that is worth considering, especially for this project, is what we call fast tracking the construction schedule. I will mention it here shortly on CM at risk, but under CSP, you don't really have that ability of putting out early bidding packages. For example, if you're really needing to get a project started under construction as soon as possible, one way of doing that is releasing early packages, such as an earthwork package, or ordering your structural steel early while you're still working on the drawings. That can save several months by doing that. So it's listed on this slide as a con for CSP because you're not able to do it. CM at risk, we'll talk about in just a moment, you do have the ability of doing that. It's also not as easy to make changes because the contractor puts together their numbers, submits it. We don't have the ability or the luxury of seeing what their pricing was, seeing what their actual bids were from subcontractors. We call that a closed book. And then in making changes because of that, you simply, you're limited a little more. And if it was an open book and you say, well, let's price doing a different material because of change in availability or whatever, under CSP, you don't have the ability of seeing, well, what is the real number I'm getting? What's the price? I mean, I have an idea if I'm getting a decent price on that change, but if I were to ask them, well, how much are you paying for that? They don't have any obligation to show you the numbers, the actual bidding numbers they're getting. So it does make changes a little more difficult. And then the fact that it's a closed book, there's a lot of trust in there that you just have to hope that you're getting decent pricing and so on potential changes or on the actual price of the whole project itself.
Before you move on.
Yes, sir.
I've been struggling a little bit about just we want quality, of course, we want all these good things, but you don't mention as a pro about, if you have a competitive market, and I don't know where we are right now in the construction market, is it pretty competitive right now or not?
Yes and no. We are seeing competitiveness on pricing on some projects, and we're not on others. And then you take that, I know you have a question, so I don't want to dwell on this, but you take that one step further and trying to anticipate what's going to happen in the future. There is a lot of concern about when things finally open up that there's going to be a shortage of materials, there's going to be a shortage of manpower at the subcontractor level and so on.
Well, my question has to do with, I feel like at least one project that I can remember is that basically there was a competitive climate and one bid ended up being substantially better than the others, and I believe things went pretty well, and obviously there was always room for glitches, but it just, I haven't seen, first off, it's not really listed as a pro that you might, in a competitive market, get a really good price, and secondly, I'm not sure, and I guess you'll explain how we're going to get a very competitive price, hopefully, if we go.
CM at risk. I will definitely do that if I don't. Be sure and remind me. Yeah, let me
I wouldn't want, and I'm just kind of looking ahead here because of course I was at the finance committee, so I'm a little ahead of some folks, but I'm just wanting to know how that works where if, let's just say, being cautious and some of the prices set very high, but then it turns out because we get really good sub prices and so on, there's some savings. I want to make sure bulk, if not all those savings, do go to the district and not to the construction manager, because obviously that doesn't help us a whole lot if a very high price given by this person we choose, because he's got to give us a price, right? Because that's the
right.
And what happens again when we do better with subs than maybe it was anticipated, or maybe again the construction manager was planning to save and so the numbers are a little on the high side. That product is at risk, right? So he's got essentially a guarantee on that price. So the incentive is certainly to be not very necessarily artificially low, because then the construction manager can get stuck. So I hope that's not too complicated a question.
No, not at all. It's a great question. And the first part of your question, though, I do want to say that historically, CSP, competitive civil proposal, does work best when we talk about money It does work best when you have a highly competitive market, not enough work out there, people are hungry, the subcontractors are getting aggressive and providing good pricing. Without a doubt, CSP does that. CM at risk is good as a broad concept when there's too much work out there and there's not enough subcontractors, or let me put it this way, not enough subcontractors interested in bidding it, because that means prices go through the roof. And so CM at risk is when you bring the construction manager on board early, they are able to work with subcontractors and all and trying to begin to build the pool that he's going to need to build this building early. So that is a big general description of when is it best for CSP compared to CM at risk. There's other reasons to select one over the other, which I am kind of dwelling on more so there. But, I mean, if you like, I could jump ahead just so I don't forget. On CM at risk, you asked what happens if we do get better pricing at the subcontractor level than anticipated. And I'm going to give you a great example. We have a project over in Columbia Resort. It is a CM at risk. The estimates that the construction manager came up with during construction prior to releasing it for bidding was a certain amount of about, I think it was about a $7 million project, not a real big one. When the bids came in, the market was great, and we actually saved $800,000 on that project, which is not a small amount for a $7 million project. And so all that savings goes directly back to the school district, which I think is what you were asking particularly. Yeah, that goes back, and that is the goal. I mean, it's always the goal of getting the best bang for your buck, taking advantages of the marketplace and so on in order for you to do that. Now in CM at risk, I'm going to talk generalities again. When CM at risk first came out, pretty much any general contractor if they wanted to try to bid on CM at risk projects, they basically just said, I'm a construction manager at risk, I'm going to bid on that project. They may or may not have a lot of experience that they can put on their resume to show, but they could go after it. So I bring that up because the first couple of years, it was a real challenge using CM at risk because the construction managers were basically general contractors, so they still viewed the project that way. They weren't used to the fact that they were a team member up front and that their estimates needed to mean something, because if they blew that estimate and the numbers came in higher than that number, then now that's the at-risk part, and they're responsible for making up that difference. And we had projects where that occurred. And so as time went by, and then as the delivery method kind of settled in and people started understanding how it's supposed to work, we started developing a really good group of construction managers, which are also contractors, but now they were doing construction management more. And they really became team leaders. Participated, in the team during design. They really dug into the drawings and found ways of saving money. They dug into the drawings and looked at constructability issues where they said, you know what, if we change how you're detailing this, we could save us some money. We could also save us some time. So they really became more of a team player, and that's what makes CM at risk worth considering now, because there are groups of contractors out there that have really perfected it and can really bring a lot of value, to a project if you got that delivery method. Does that kind of help?
Yeah. Yes, it does.
Okay. Okay, so we did kind of talk about that, and I jumped ahead a little bit, but I'm going to go ahead and say, so CM at risk, the difference between CSP and CM at risk, other than what we've already talked about a little bit, is that they do come on board the project very early. In fact, the earlier the better. If you can bring the construction manager on board during design, then some of the things I just mentioned we're able to take advantage of, having him being part of the team and evaluating things on costs and constructability and schedules and so on. Also, when they start early in the process, then the discussions of how can we speed up the project can be made. And so when we look at things like I mentioned before about what if we did early bid packages, to release the earthwork package where they do the dirt work, or the underground plumbing and things like that. Steel is always a long lead item. So if we could do a steel package to where the structural engineer jumps ahead, designs it, and then that can be released and they can get it in place to have the steel started early while we're still drawing the drawings. So now we're overlapping construction with the construction document time, which is a several month period of being sure we put everything that we have to have in that building in the specifications or on the drawings. So there's some real savings there as well. I did mention something about the subcontractors getting on board early. I will say in the early days of construction management at risk, there was the tendency of the contractor picking subcontractors that they know and asking their help on pricing. And then at the time when this first came out, there also was a tendency that other subcontractors assumed that, well, shoot, he's already working with a mechanical subcontractor A, and so I'm not going to bother to give you a price on it. And at the beginning, there was a tendency of pricing being a little bit higher at CM at risk. That is not the case now. Yes, during the process, they will have several subcontractors of every discipline, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, and then every other, everything you need in building a project. But when it comes time to ask for bids, it's competitively done. And then we don't have to, almost anymore, have to get in the CM's pocket and make sure he's calling subs to get pricing and all that. They do that themselves. And so the turnout is very good for subcontractor pricing using CM at risk. So that was an old problem and it's not so much anymore. The way it's laid out, similar to CSP, you're the owner as a school district, but you can see it's a little bit different. That triangle there makes it more of a team where the architects and engineers do the same thing we do on both delivery methods. We design it, we draw it up, get it ready for bidding. The construction manager, again, part of that triangle, they're involved right at the front, looking at how's it going to be built, doing cost estimates, scheduling, and so on. But all the subcontracts are still under the construction manager. And I'm at fault, I'll still sometimes call them contractors, general contractors, and sometimes call them construction managers. But all of the subcontracts will fall under them. So when you have a project that is faced with critical scheduling, or tight budgets, or especially phasing, then that's when CM at risk may be something worth considering. That along with them being at the table as we're designing it and drawing it, actively participating. One of the big ones is, I mentioned it, is the open book process. In an open book process at CM at risk, we're all there when they open all the bids for them subcontractors. We'll see every one of them. We're in their office when they come in. Under CSP, because of just the nature of that delivery method, we don't have that luxury. They just submit a lump sum of the project, and we don't know the details. How much did they actually, what kind of pricing did they get from some of their subcontractors and so on. So the open book makes it easier, a little bit of comfort level on what you're paying for. It also makes it easier when you need to make changes in the project. You want to add some things or whatever. It's still an open book. So when you get pricing from the subcontractors, you're seeing every bit of it. And so you're able to make changes. Oh, I just thought of something else, a difference as well. It's not uncommon to have a couple of subcontractors that you may have done work with in the past on other projects, and you would just soon not do work with them as well. Under CM at risk, because we're there at the table when all these bids come in, you have a much more now of opportunity to participate in selecting subs. Because you can see who was the low bidder on the sub, and maybe you're having issues with them on another project. Well, how much more would it be if we go to the next low bidder? You see the numbers because it's an open book. So that gives you a little bit of ability. In CSP, that same scenario, they tell you who I'm just going to make it up, their mechanical sub is, for example, and you go, oof, wow, we've had some problems with them. We may even be in a lawsuit with them over a project. How much would it be for us to bypass their bid that you got to the next low bidder? Well, they can give you any number that they want because it's not an open book, it's a closed book. Not that that's bad or good, but it's just kind of, gives you a difference between the two. So hopefully that kind of just gives you an overview. We could talk a long time about delivery methods, but in comparing the pros and cons of those two, I mentioned at the beginning that this project is probably a pretty good candidate for CM at risk because there is going to be a lot of phasing and scheduling between building on two different pieces of property, especially when one building has to be torn down at a certain time and then rebuilt on another piece of property. At the same time, you're waiting to tear that down so you can start the new 5-6 building as quickly as you can. So we would have no hesitation in recommending for these two projects to go construction management at risk. Like I say, every project is different, and the needs will lean towards another delivery method or another. So for sure, I wouldn't recommend we do CM at risk for all the projects in the bond, for example. But for this one, I think it's probably a pretty good candidate for consideration. So any questions, the things I may have left out on that description?
I was on the finance committee, so I heard this last.
Okay.
But no, I appreciate and also the handout you gave us that has the breakdown of the two and pros and cons, so. it's very
Yeah, I did
helpful.
pass one out. I think I probably did all the big ones. I did. But that's just another way of looking at comparing the two delivery methods.
And as just a point of information, the CSP is the standard process that you use, so it would require board approval to go with CMAR for this project. So today was information, and then, unless we hear differently, we'll be bringing that back for a vote on the October 19th meeting.
Okay. If there's no additional questions or concerns, we'll move on to information item 2, presentation of enroll your own identity.
Thank you.
Matthew's bringing up my slides, I believe. Good afternoon. It's really an honor to be here to talk about something that our HR department finds really a way that we can really serve our employees in a real positive manner, and it's something that's required of our employees, but it's the fingerprinting process. So to give you a little bit of information about the background of the fingerprinting process, I'll kind of walk you through a brief timeline. And back in January 1st, 2008, Matthew, can you switch my slide? Can I click? Okay, I'll do it then. In 2008, our legislators said that all of our employees had to be fingerprinted, and from that point forward, we fingerprinted our teachers or employees as they were hired. And then between 2008 and 2011 is when everybody who was sitting in an employee position with the school district had to be fingerprinted through that process. So then the DPS, they were our fingerprinting experts and the holder of all fingerprints. They said, we can't maintain and sustain the volume of people who need to be fingerprinted, and they were still doing fingerprints on cards. And so they said, we've got to get somebody to help us. And they put out for bid for somebody to come in and do this for them. And then a company by the name of Idemia they received the award, and they were able to do the fingerprints electronically. And so they became the sole owner, and Identia has a sub-company called Identico. And when I refer to Identico, that's the company that we're in relationship with, and they are the exclusive in Texas fingerprinting agency or provider that serves all fingerprinting for Texas, whatever the reason and the person gets a fingerprint. So then, why did HR decide to investigate this and look at this further? And it became a real problem in the summer of 2020 when COVID was still, and is still, a problem for us. And we have a fingerprinting center nearby. It's over in College Station. But the number of people that wanted to get into centers, plus the center itself, temporarily shut down a number of times. And I understand that it's just a one-person office, one person doing this service. And so they were shutting down, and our employees were getting really frustrated about trying to get fingerprints, and that they get an appointment, they have to cancel because the center had to close, and it just became a real struggle to get fingerprints. And to this day, and I'll give you some data here in a moment, it's still a struggle for our people to get fingerprinted. So then they were forced to go to other places. It was 4 weeks out to get fingerprints done. Remote centers, they fill up quickly, they close, like I said. And then, like I said a while ago, they weren't just fingerprinting educators in Texas, but everybody that wanted tossed a pre-check. Not that you can travel a lot right now, but concealed carry, that was a big push for those people that wanted to carry, and so they had to get fingerprinted. The State Board of Education, our judicial system, public servants, medical professionals, truck drivers, child care providers, and the list went on and on as a number of professions had to be fingerprinted. So then, this chart, I didn't switch it, did I? I'm not used to this. So this chart shows you kind of what it looked like for an employee coming on board. And so on 9/16, when we looked at this to present to the Finance Committee, this was what it looked like. In College Station, on 9/16, they had to wait till 10/1 to get a fingerprint. And then on 9/29, they were still waiting to 10/13 to get a fingerprint. And as you can see, Navasota's not far away. They're a little bit better with the timeline as of 9/29, but Rockdale is still closed. Hempstead, with a little bit of wait time. Huntsville, they have 2 sites in Huntsville. And what's really interesting about them is they are only open on Mondays. And then in Groesbeck and Crockett, they share the same person. And so every other Wednesday is when they're open. And so they're not open every day of the week. And that became another burden as well for our employees. And so what are the benefits? I mean, one of the best things that I can say that it offers for our employees is this reduction of stress, because we have people we've recommended now, and we're still waiting to get them here because they can't get into a fingerprint center. And so we're able to get them to get to work sooner. It's a service to any of our new employees, our interns that we have come in, any of our Aggie-related services and programs that come to us. ESS, even though they're not a BISD employee, we contract with them, and so we're able to fingerprint our substitutes, and then any of our independent contractors that come in. And we'd be able to schedule the appointment immediately with them, and then once they come in and we do their electronic prints, we get a turnaround in 24 hours at the most. And so we could fill positions very quickly, because fingerprinting is the #1 reason that stalls our applications right now. And so it would help us in the long run, because right now, the positions that are open and we're waiting on prints, we're providing a substitute teacher into that classroom. So that's an additional cost to the district that we wouldn't have to encumber if we had the teacher or the employee hired to be in that spot. So that is it. So any questions about this process? It takes about 8 weeks once we sign the official paperwork with Identigo for the process, them coming in, them training our people, and getting us up and going.
Will you give us the cost numbers and the finance committee?
The lack at finance is a little less than $20,000, and that's for the setup, the equipment, a year, 3 years of their service, and then after that, it's $1,300 and something for the service agreement from that. It costs a person $50 to go get their fingerprints done. And we don't necessarily handle the money. The money is handled either directly to Identico with a credit card or a cashier's check, so we don't have to handle the money in our office, which is lovely, right? And then they give us $2 back for, I guess, our service, I don't know, but we get a $2 refund
$2.
to, I know, but anyway, that's what it is.
Well, my question at the meeting, and I'll just remind you, I was a little concerned because of some of my experiences in my office where, okay, we're changing out the equipment, that's obsolete, so if you're gonna continue, you gotta another $26,000 piece of equipment or
Right.
whatever. So did you get any information?
We did, we followed up and checked on that as well. And because their equipment is encrypted for security purposes, we can't just go out and buy a PC computer and use that. But they, when just normal wear and tear of the equipment and things of that nature, they would replace it as part of the agreement. If we break something in the equipment, then that's on us. But just wear and tear, no. Software updates run through them, and that's part of the service. If something were to be really extremely bad and we had to have a technician come in, we do have to pay for their travel to get here. I'm not for sure where they would have to travel from. You know, they're all over Texas, so I couldn't tell you, and they could not tell us either as to how much that would cost us. Okay,
No other questions, and thank you.
thank you very much.
All right, next item are business services. And first up is consider approval of the proposed schematic design for Stephen F. Austin.
Thank you. So, first up, it brought SDH Architecture here today to kind of go over the schematic construction design for the renovation of the SF8 Annex. It is going to mimic everything that was done for SF8 Middle School. So after their presentation, we will be asking for approval of their design. I want to introduce you to part of the team with SDH Architecture is James Halliburton, Wade Zimmer, and Eric Opperman.
Good afternoon. Thank you for letting us come speak to you today. I'm James Halliburton with SDH Architecture. Maybe I take this off. You can hear me a little. As Paul mentioned, we have Wade Zimmer and Eric Opperman here, and I think it's important that they're here because when we move into the construction process for this, you will see their faces a lot more than you see my face. So we had a really good time working on this project. Some of the Ginger and Paul and Dr. Ibarra and Rob and Julia, they all got to see my face quite a bit and Dr. Whitbeck on lots of Zoom meetings to go over designs. So you guys get to see Wade and Eric a lot now. So I'm going to give you kind of a brief overview of what we're doing with the annex building here. We brought a set of plans, which is quite a complex. What you can see there's a giant roll that Eric's holding there, and there's a lot of pages. But the best part should be the little handout on your desk. The colored renderings always seem to be the winner for these types of things. So this project consists of about 18,000 square feet of renovation, 17,913 to be exact. We are going to basically remove everything on the inside of that building, including abating any asbestos that's in there. and we're gonna install a fire sprinkler system. Or actually, we're gonna tie this building to the existing sprinkler system that's in the building we're in now. We're gonna add back 11 classrooms, 5 on the first floor, 6 on the second floor. On the first floor, we'll have a large dance room similar to what's there now, but it will have, you can see a rendering on your page there, a mirror wall with some 1-inch Marley rubber flooring, 2 changing rooms, some small storage cubbies for students. And one of the biggest bonuses to this renovation is we're going to put new restrooms on both floors. So right now, all the fixtures are only on the first floor. So we're going to provide 3 fixtures for each boys and girls on each floor. We have moved the hand washing stations out to what we call off corridor. So teachers and faculty can see students washing their hands, because apparently I think the word that was used, undesirable behavior, happens splashing on the wall. So anyway, we're going to cure that, have those out in the corridor. And then there are water fountains out by those restrooms as well, and then each level has a bottle filler as well, so students can fill their own water bottles. Then also on the second floor, we have a small teacher workroom and a bathroom, separate bathroom for faculty. And then next to that, and this is from a systems perspective, we're going to get rid of all of the ceiling mounted air conditioner systems and put in one large central unit that ties into the plant. So it's much more efficient. We'll have much more efficient air distribution for temperature control in those rooms. And that will go in the back corner of the second floor. And we have our bid package will have an alternate bid to replace all of the original window systems. Those are all 1972 aluminum single pane window systems. So we've worked out an alternate bid to replace those with a energy efficient double pane, low E glazed aluminum system. And we structured that as an alternate, so when the prices come in, the district can make a valuation and determine if that's something they want to go with. We're also having an elevator refinish allowance. So that particular model of elevator, you can spend no money or you can spend lots and lots and lots of money. So we put an allowance in the bid package, and when we get the final construction numbers back, we can decide what level of refinish we'd like to go with that elevator, depending on what our final bid numbers are. And then exterior to the building, we have a new canopy that connects to the SFA cafeteria and a new ADA entrance ramp there at the end. So the finishes, as you see in those renderings down there, are going to match the 2015 SFA construction across the little drive aisle there. So we should get some good consistency in the finishes across both sides of that campus. We think it's going to tie together quite nicely. So we do have the drawings here. If there's anything you have a specific question about, I'd be happy to show them to you and answer any concerns you may have.
So in terms of the exterior, the only proposed change is windows as an option? So most of the work's on the interior?
Yes, ma'am. Most of the work's on the interior. We are replacing the storefronts at the 2 main entrances so that the electric card readers will be integrated into that system. But the windows are an alternate bid, so we can evaluate cost and make a value structure.
Sure.
Is there any option for putting an additional, probably not very practical, but I'll ask anyway, we call this one screen window, which we use another pane of glass over, so we could provide some insulation without having to pull them all out and replace them.
We didn't consider that. That's not a, we didn't consider that. We can look into it. When I talked to several different curtain wall storefront vendors about these options, they said in their experience, the most cost-effective way to do it is just replace the entire system with a new thermally broken aluminum structure and an insulated unit. But we can definitely explore some other options if you'd like us to.
Well, when I first got the numbers, saw the numbers on what was kind of the proposed cost of this, it was a little frustrating to me that the cost per square foot was more than new construction. So I don't know if that's still projected or not. I guess all I'm looking for is some assurance that if there was that y'all kept an eye on, if we can save something by doing this, then let's do this. If it's still going to be a really good solution. not shortcuts to the point that it's going to sacrifice for quality or usability. But I guess that's what I'm looking for, is because that was the original deal, was projected costs. It was, again, kind of discouraging to see in excess of the construction costs. And I know that the demolition costs, I guess, is maybe part of the reason why. So that's not much of a question that you can probably understand, but maybe you can respond.
I can, and I can, maybe I can do that with some experience. So we do a lot of renovation of school buildings. In fact, the 1972 would be a fairly new building for us in terms of renovation. And it's been our experience that the selective demolition just ends up costing more in the end. When you get inside, an existing building and you start trying to selectively take out walls and leave parts, it just ends up kind of being a big mess. And subcontractors prefer to just wipe it all out and install it. And this particular building, since we're adding a fire sprinkler, that will save a lot of labor costs. If there's not any walls in there and the sprinkler installer can show up and put all that system in without any obstructions and moving around things, we will save some money on that. We did look at, in terms of energy efficiency, or I would say life cycle efficiency, the mechanical systems. So this building's been in use for almost 50 years now. We anticipate you want to get at least another 50 out of it. The mechanical system we're putting in here will be much more efficient over the long term than the smaller distributed units that we had before. And it ties into your plant system, which is really nice. So we did have budget in mind on almost every decision. Well, I say almost every because we're trying to get a little mural piece on that little door we're filling out front, but in terms of cost, it's very de minimis.
And what was the impact of the asbestos abatement? I'm sure that's not inexpensive in these types of renovations.
I don't remember the full scope on that. I think Paul may have some more info on that.
It's, if I remember right, it's mostly mechanical,
I want to say maybe
and possibly flooring, and the glue on the floor would be a big one, and the insulation on mechanical is typically where it's found. Nothing else really jumps off the top of my head where it would be.
Chalkboards.
Oh, and
Chalkboard
chalkboard.
was the mastic and the
Forgot
chalkboard.
the chalkboards in there. Yes, and chalkboards.
That kind of becomes part of demolition since we're not being
Definitely.
selective. They're taking it out.
Right, but it's certainly a piece that
It is.
changes how all that's done, and that costs additional money.
So I want to say thank you first for the water fountains having the bottle refill on it, because that was going to be one of my questions, that I want the water fountains to be able to refill a water bottle. But on the other image you had that had the outside, it had the handicap accessible, the ADA ramp, and it looks like it's going to the side of the building.
It kind of goes around the corner. So because of the length of the run, it has to start where you see it, and it goes around the corner and up into the access there on the...
So for a child coming from the other building under the portico, they're going to have to come outside the portico and then get on the ramp and then go up and then make a right-hand turn
They
and then
would.
go in the building?
They would have to do that.
I don't like that, because if there's somebody that's in a wheelchair or something, they don't need to be outside of the cover in order to enter the other building.
Well, for inclement weather, the existing ADA accessibility will still be in play.
Yeah, that existing ramp will remain, so that there will be two ways for someone to enter.
Is it a 12-to-1 like this one should be, or?
Yes, the existing covered ramp that's on the outside of this building,
Yep.
over that right here, it's still...
Right,
it's
right.
still-
It's what we did temporarily,
It's the temporary
Yeah.
one.
but it's still within
Yeah.
the code.
Yes.
We weren't a fan of the having to go outside of the cover either. There's just not really a
Well, I
place
just
to
don't
play.
like to have to intentionally take children with special needs on a different route than everybody else is going, and I certainly don't like to put them in the weather. And I certainly don't like them having to go behind a building, or, you know, it's
I agree.
just...
We can look again and see if there's a better way to run that, but
Well, and there's probably not, because I'm sure you looked at it first. Like, I trust you, I was just wondering, because this one did have a cover on it. And so it just...
we could look at putting some awnings out the side of that But we're still talking, we actually priced spanning the whole 30-something feet with an awning, and it just became pretty onerous in the budget. Because I built a model and made the structural engineer price it for me. But we can look at some other options, we're open to that.
Are you comfortable with it? Like if your kid was here and was in a wheelchair and was having to use those routes, are you comfortable with it?
I'm comfortable that there is an alternate covered area for them
Then I'm
when it's
good with it.
when it's raining.
As long as you see it that way too, then I'm good with that.
I'm comfortable that there is a covered route for them.
Are you anticipating handicap parking in those spots right there by that new ramp? That there might be a spot or two there so that if a parent came or maybe they were visiting, they were bringing the child or
Can we scroll down to a site
patron in the
plan?
wheelchair?
I can't remember if there's parking in
I
front
don't-
of it. I don't think there
I don't think we did.
We have to go down quite a ways, just keep.
That's something we may want to look at, Paul, because we have parking spaces right in that area. And we may want to
So we could definitely look
consider
into adding a couple of handicap spaces for there.
I think there's existing two there now.
Well, they're down on.
I think they're down further
this end.
toward this end.
They're more on the admin entrance end
Yeah.
versus the SFA annex end. And that could be something where, do we need to keep all those, or do we just relocate those?
I would relocate those closer to this ramp, and then the people, the other patrons who
Yeah.
come this way, they have
We
the
could definitely
front.
look at that then. Just
Made a note, I'll
relocating,
definitely examine that.
Thank you.
just relocating the existing ones over here.
There's a lot of planes in there. We're getting
It's a good
close.
observation,
Just a
Mr.
little
Wayne.
more. There we go.
Good
There are.
observation.
So the new ADA spaces are there at the, next to the elevator entrance.
Yes.
I see.
But we could look at moving some down, we could put some more in. So that would put that access straight right into the elevator lobby entrance.
I see the good in that too. So
What about one on each end or something?
one on each end would make sense.
Can do
And
that.
it would most likely be that they would enter through the front entrance of SFA. So if the parents drop them off or pick them up or something, they would probably enter or exit through the main.
Right,
doors
because
of
they have to
SFA.
check in.
So this is a back door, side door kind of thing, but for fire escape and to get out, we're talking the end of the hall.
I think so.
Okay.
There are two exits at either end of the corridor.
Yes.
So the one closest to the handicap.
But there's not a
parking-
ramp on both ends, there's only a ramp on
Well,
one.
one is
One is
ground
accessible.
level.
Okay.
One's ground level, so there's no stairs on this end, right, practically right here behind the boardroom.
I trust you.
It's a ground
See, I
level.
can't see it. Like I don't see it, like I don't.
Well, if you want to, after the meeting, we can go right up
No,
here
I
and I can
trust
show you.
you, I'm good.
I can show you.
It's good. It's just that thing on the plans, I didn't,
We can do tours all day long.
yeah, I know, yeah.
So both entrance and exits are accessible.
Okay.
The one by the elevator is at the, we'll call grade level, so it can be entered straight from the parking spaces, straight to the top.
Thank you.
So we're excited to get this going because we've been working on it a while.
That's good.
If there's no other questions, I believe this is an action item.
I move approval of the schematic design for the Stephen F. Austin Annex located at 800 South Coulter Drive, Bryan, Texas, as presented.
Second.
I have a motion by Mrs. Dwayne, a second by Dr. Harland, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries, and we will move on to Business Services 2, Engineering Services for District-Wide EA Systems Upgrade. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. The next item that we have up is to discuss the moving forward with the district-wide public address system. And this is an item that was noted in our facility assessments. Was also brought forward by the bond steering and the safety and security task force. upgrading and standardizing our public address systems. Ms. Caroline has also talked about this in previous board meetings, so we're moving forward with it to try to get a jump start on this again with some of these projects. So we did a request for qualifications on this project to pick an engineering firm to look at this and design this for us. A team of 6 administrators that representing technology, construction, and finance reviewed the request for qualification that we got submitted. There were 11 in total. 4 were picked to go forward to an interview and presentation process. We went forward with that process, which involved a 20-minute presentation of their qualifications and projects that they completed, and a 20-minute Q&A that was completed as well. You have the final results there. What we're asking today is to move forward with the design or move forward with authorizing the superintendent to negotiate that process and contract for designing that for the district-wide public address system.
I move to authorize the superintendent to negotiate and enter into contract for engineering services with Cleary Zimmerman for the district public address system upgrades.
The motion by Dr. Harlan, the second by Mr. Stasny, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries, and that will take us down into school leadership.
Thank you.
Guys, thank you all for the opportunity. Good afternoon. We wanted to come and hopefully answer any questions that you have. Dr. Ibarra talked a little bit about the planning process and what each year looks like. This is an unprecedented year. And so, normally it's kind of a different scenario. We're looking at a whole bunch of different things. This year it's been interesting to say the least. I will say that we're up and running. And the data is coming in from various locations, but as it's coming in, obviously the principals are doing a great job in getting with their constituents in a collaborative manner and developing not only the campus improvement plans, but also the TIP. And so we provided you those campus improvement plans and would be happy to answer any questions that you have. And then obviously the TIP as well. So we've got both items on the agenda today. So that process has looked a little different as it has in years past, but nonetheless, that collaborative piece is still in place. So as y'all will know, where typically you would meet in person and you bring everybody in, it's moved to a Google Hangout or a Zoom call. And so in some ways, we've been able to tap into maybe some parents that might not have been able to attend meetings. So we've been able to kind of do that. At the same time, it is a little awkward from what we're used to, but they're figuring it out and have figured it out and are working with not only the parents, the teachers, the students, everyone to try to take an unprecedented year and still see growth. We cannot take time off. I mean, that's known, right? We want to make sure that we're constantly adding value and making improvements as a campus and as an individual. So that's really what this document is about.
It's a guide and it's very fluid. And so as data comes back, they will make adjustments to the plan to meet the needs of the students throughout the year.
It's been interesting. I wouldn't, I can just tell you, for example, one DBA, a couple of them in, sometimes students figure out if I stay home when I check in, my data's not there. And so you have to, you're constantly trying to fill in gaps and holes. And so you're working with them, whereas in the traditional manner, they all come, they're all there. It's only the kids that are absent. And so it's a cleaner system in years past than it is now, which complicates things. And so the state is, they've not really given us any guidance on what this year looks like. They've not said really anything other than, we're moving forward, which we all tend to believe can't necessarily be the reality, but they've yet to unclear us on anything. And so we're moving forward. We've hired tutors and we've gone at it. Dr. Ibarra has scrubbed the budget with Kevin's help, and we've looked at money, adding it sooner than later to try to make up any gaps that we have. And so whether it's for the teachers to make sure they have time with their online kids, or whether it's direct intervention with students that we know have gaps, they're really just trying to get as creative as we possibly can and making sure that we not only make up for time lost, but that we take care of what we need to, because we just don't know. And really, it's either way we need to make gains. We need to add value to each kid.
Do you have any questions?
Our online students, do you have any idea about the kids that are online? Are they pretty much a cross-section of our socioeconomic and various subpopulations, or is it?
I have not run it by demographics. I've not had a noticeable trend surface, but I've not actually run the data specifically for that purpose.
I would say a couple things. Number one, you take Houston and Johnson, and we have more of those. Houston and Johnson Elementary, we have higher numbers of those students back than we do Kent. That's not
It's true.
true.
Yeah.
So, and those are just, I just happen to oversee a couple of those campuses, and so I know those numbers specifically.
Well,
And,
I'm sorry.
go ahead. Let's go.
I'll also say along those lines, we know that Kemp Carver Elementary often serves a number of students with high medical needs,
Special
receiving
needs.
special education, and so it might also be indicative of medical need for that campus.
It's just, you might have seen this, the Commissioner Mike Grant had a chart showing, to the extent that I don't know, based on zip codes, about performance change with regard to high poverty, middle, and both your zip code areas. That's all they could do. That it was very pronounced, the difference, and you can kind of expect what the difference was. It was the progress was, or the additional to diverge, and the poor folks not doing as well during the period that were closed down last spring. And I mentioned that as a sort of a scary thought, but also I'm sure y'all know that I guess we're beating the bushes trying to figure out is there anything more we can do, because those kids, I guess, were already behind when they got here, probably a little more settled. And then secondly, that's what I was wondering about, how many are still not attending school in person. So I don't have anything to say other than it sounds like a real challenge.
One thing I can say is that in the campus plans, the principals are addressing the gaps from the spring and what they're going to do, different strategies to decrease those and eliminate the gaps.
So we were very excited when we saw the numbers coming back. They want them back. I don't think there's a principal that doesn't want their kids back, for the reasons that you listed. Kids that, typically have, a situation at home that would allow them to stay home and learn, they're progressing at that rate, right? Parents are, involved and connected and engaged and are able to support. Because it does require a high level of support to stay home. Those that are not, unfortunately, that gap widens. And so that's where our principals, where we're all just deeply concerned about it. So we had a meeting, I guess it was now 2 or 3 weeks ago, with even Judge Hill, where we sat down with a Zoom call to look at it, because as we start looking at truancy and we put in place our raw we start trying to find where kids are and we start issuing letters, it really becomes a team approach to try to track these individuals down. And so we've done our best to try to find all the cracks to be able to bring them back in, because I made the comment to Judge Hill, it's like, at some point we're going to need your help. Like, we're trying to find them, we're knocking on doors, we're doing everything we possibly can, but we may need you to help us be a heavy in some sense and bring those kids back or get them to engage online, because right now it's just, we're moving and kids are moving. They're moving forward, and so if you're not in school, you're not moving forward, and so we need to circle back, and we want you. That's the message that we even talked about in cabinet today, is we want our kids back. We want you back. Kind of whatever break or however you got there and whatever time has been lapsed, we still want you back. And so, I had a kid, honestly, I got a call from Houston Elementary at 7 o'clock this morning, and working through a situation with a young man that withdrew, who got lost on his way to the next district and did not, enroll, and finally came back to Bryan ISD. And we were sitting down working on a plan how to get that young man back into Houston and working at the rate, that he needs to. And so they're in front, the parents are in front of you, they're enrolling. We just need to have a real frank conversation about it to try to get them back. And that's what we find in all of this is there's such variability in all these stories. And until you get into it and you really spend the time to investigate it, you can't just slap something on it and think that that's going to be the solution. And so we've really encouraged our people to get into those weeds and get into those details to try to figure out what's going on. And they are. They're doing it. I appreciated the phone call today because, honestly, he had a situation that we could have reacted completely differently to. He had a situation, and it wasn't terrible at all, but we got that kid in front of us and we really wanted him to remain in school because we didn't want there to be some other delay because there's just been too long. And so, the kids can't be the ones that suffer. And right now, adults, in some cases in their lives, are making decisions for them that they're going to suffer long-term consequences for. So, the schools, we've got to be, all that they need us to be.
Thanks for that compassionate response, because one of my concerns is how we're counting attendance at times.
It's confusing.
Well, but I've heard of cases where attendance is counted on something that doesn't count for a grade. So students are doing the things for a grade, but not the thing that they needed to do to be counted present. So
we talked about that this morning.
Yeah.
We talked about that this morning.
We talked about that this morning.
Trying to clean that up.
So, just to put it into perspective, Raw Week came on board the third week, and it's a software package that takes all of our data, creates these letters, and then sends them out.
Yes, they do.
We knew they were going to be rough, and so I told everybody ahead of time, this is going to be rough, but we've wiped the system out. So the way the state gave us 12 weeks to kind of fix it, we wiped that whole first 6 weeks out because we felt like it was education. We need to educate the parents. Yep, some of them aren't doing what they're supposed to, and they're knowingly not doing what they're supposed to. But that's not the majority of them. So let's wipe it out. Let's figure it out. Let's work with the parents. Let's respond. And starting the second 6 weeks, we'll start fresh. So all those first letter, second letter, they actually are already wiped out. We wiped them out. And we're starting over. And we're going to work with some other folks on how to get that out there because we really didn't know how to say, hey, this is a big deal. So,
no, it is. And,
it is.
I had a conversation with a friend. I can remember way back before I was on the board, there were a couple times I picked my kid up early because he had recess at the very end of the day. This is way back, Bonham Elementary. And he was being counted absent.
Right.
And those add up over time. Well, it was an education for me as a parent to understand how that works and that does hurt our district when we do those kind of things. So knowing that we have an LMS in place that can help us with some of that accounting of who's logging in when and how much time they spent.
How to even count that is now we've got to take it down at the teacher level to figure out. And I think Dr. Barr and some other folks are working on somebody figured it out, and so they're sharing it and because it's exactly right. They log in, they do something. We got to give them credit. We don't need to deny credit for their attendance for the day. So we wiped out first 6 weeks. We're working on second, knowing that there'll be some repeaters. We'll catch them. We'll catch them.
And I don't want it to go unnoticed that I see that this is hard and this is complex and it's new and it's very different from what we've done before. So I appreciate the efforts being made to handle those things.
I will say one last thing. The tip that's up there, we talked about the tip plan. I can tell you when you look at all those campuses, we were frustrated that we didn't get to do state accountability. We weren't relieved. I can step foot on Mitchell and she was ticked that we did not get to have it. And I'm being nice. She was very frustrated because we felt like we were in a really good position to not have to mess with this junk anymore where we had to. So it wasn't as if we were like, oh my God, thank God the pandemic hit. We were like, this is not good. We want to be able to take these exams. In fact, even if you had given her the option to take it in the pandemic, she probably would have said, I want to take it. Even if she had been a couple months off because they felt like they were that prepared for these exams. So even though that tip's up there, it's a continuation. I do not feel like, our campuses are headed in the right direction. Sherry Hedstrom specifically from Mitchell doing a great job. We can go down the list. They were ready and willing to take these exams. We felt very, very confident about it.
Well, and we felt that way from a district-wide accountability. As you know, the 79.3 was just, the superintendent's, happy that it went up 5 points, but nightmare from being the C++ that we've talked so much about. But the CCMR was moving up again. another notch, and you know, graduation rate, and then with the benchmarking, we were really poised and wanted to take those tests, all of us. So it's not, you know, not just our one IR school, but everybody. So it's a shame. And then now, what's really a shame is that we know nationwide the talk of digressing for children. So now, what's going to happen when we enter back in? How do we get back up to where we were for some kids? Knowing that it's going to be a challenge. So I think everyone's in the same boat, but it is challenging.
I move approval of the campus improvement plans as presented and authorize the administration to make adjustments as necessary to meet the needs of students.
Second.
A motion by Dr. Harlan, a second by Mrs. Dwayne. Excuse me. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. We have one more, right?
And it's
Targeted.
same conversation.
Continuation of the same conversation.
Right.
This was the one, the public comment part.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Do you want me to go ahead and do it? Okay. I move approval of the targeted improvement plans for Bonham, Branch, Crockett, Henderson, Houston, Johnson, Mitchell, Ross, Long, Rayburn, and MC Harris as presented, and authorize the administration to make adjustments as necessary to meet the needs of students.
Second.
A motion by Mrs. Dwayne, second by Dr. Harlan. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you all.
All right, and that brings us up to board goals. The board had an opportunity to meet in a workshop recently and talk through a number of different goals. And then have also had a chance to kind of review these online, and as individuals provide comment back to the administration to combine these into this presentation for us to look at.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. McCall. It is my privilege to facilitate the review and your consideration of approval of the 2020-2021 board goals. Of course, everything that we do is grounded in our Bryan ISD vision and Bryan ISD mission, so we always start with this in mind before we do any of this critical work. And what Mr. McCall shared is true. The board is bound each year per legal policy to adopt a comprehensive set of goals for the district and our superintendent. Hence the reason on September 24th, we did convene in a called meeting to develop board goals. So again, those goals were developed, they've been discussed, they were refined, and then here we are today, and the purpose of this meeting is to review and for you to consider approval of these said goals. The 5 broad categories remain unchanged: academic goal, a culture and climate goal, workforce, community engagement goal, and safety and security. I'll go into a little bit more detail, but first let me begin with a reminder. We shared with you last year that all of our improvement plans are actually required to be aligned to the board goal, so this meeting is very timely. At the last board meeting, Dr. Ibarra asked you to consider approval, and you did approve our district improvement plan. And today you've taken an action and you have approved our campus improvement plans and our targeted improvement plans. So all of the wheels on the screen, as you see, are in motion and aligned, again, which is required. And then also last year, you may recall Dr. Ibarra shared some new requirements with House Bill 3 related to college, career, and military readiness and early childhood literacy and numeracy plans. So you'll be hearing a lot more about that because those are embedded with our academic goal. And when her team presents, she will bring information and share it in the annual report in particular. So moving on to talk about board goal academics. This is our core business in public education. So the board goal as it's presented is to support the academic and post-secondary success of every student. This honors your thoughts that night when we were in here developing this because of the broad nature. First of all, it's every student. And then when we say post-secondary success, we want every student to be equipped to walk out of our doors upon graduation to enter the workforce or enter college or a trade school or the military or any combination of any one of those. We want them to be successful. So again, that's board goal number 1, academic. Moving on to board goal number 2 for culture and climate. This sets the tone for our district, and I think this honors the work that you did the night we had the called meeting, as it encourages a positive regard, again, for all people, setting the tone for the learning environment
for our students and our staff to be most successful. Board goal number 3, which is related to the workforce, honors the work that you did with emphasis on recruitment and maintaining the high-quality workforce through competitive benefits and differentiated professional learning. And I recall the discussion that night, how important it was, again, to emphasize recruitment and maintaining to prevent the staff turnover. And then also an emphasis on differentiated professional learning, because we know we need to value the skill sets of our veteran workforce all the way to our novice workforce. So it must not be a one-size-fits-all. So differentiation is the key for our success of our employees. Board goal number 4, which is community engagement, and I think this is, probably one of our strengths because we've done a really great job of engaging all of our partners. But again, we want to emphasize that our partners are our students, families, staff, and the community at large. When I say community at large, that includes Texas A&M University and Blinn College, all to collaborate with our stakeholders' engagement to achieve the district's vision. And then finally, safety and security. This is our top priority, of course, keeping our students and our staff safe are the goal states to ensure a physically and emotionally safe and secure learning environment by welcoming all students, staff, and visitors. And I recall the discussion that night, we added emotionally safe because the emotional well-being is just as important as the physical well-being. So, next steps. Should you take action today to approve these goals, we will meet with the board's established committees to review data and start to work towards key performance indicators. And then we will, in the next subsequent board meetings, come back in and drill down into each goal separately. So we'll come in with one goal and look at key performance indicators and let you weigh in at that point in time and engage you again through the committee process. So with that, do you have any questions or any discussions?
I appreciate, so I reviewed these after our last meeting and provided a little bit of feedback, and I love what's here. These are good. Thank you.
Thank you. One change within this is addressing a concern that Mr. Stesian had, which is getting down into the KPIs, so the next level down, because in general, the board goals across the board do not change a lot year to year. It's really down underneath those, down in the KPIs. And so working with Dr. Whitbeck and the team, basically the strategy is to, each one of these board goals will be aligned to a committee. And then within that committee, obviously, the easiest one is academic, is aligned to the learning committee, and they can drill down into those specific high-level KPIs and then bring them back to the board to further discuss and look at in the board meeting. The workforce initiative really falls under finance. Community engagement into safety and security. Let me go there next. Safety and security is in the safety and security. Those are the 3 that line up very well. Community engagement lines up within the community and communications. The one that did not line up just with a natural is that culture and climate, because it fits across every committee. And so that one, the executive committee will take up with representation from, I believe, looking at the map of where we're all assigned, where Dr. Harlan and I are assigned, and Ms. Benford, we represent that whole entire cross-section from those committees. So, that's at least the go-forward plan to get through, getting down to the KPIs underneath here. Every board member will have a chance to provide feedback and look at them during that meeting where it's targeted to look at that particular goal. We'll look at the KPIs and what's going to be measured underneath there.
Well, I'm fine with all that. I think what you just said was in terms of, as they're developed, the performance indicators, we're going to be involved, I would hope. And then even when we're moving through the year, kind of like we do at committees, I would like to see the committees maybe working more entailed, but then it's still, I would hope, be presented to the entire board to see how progress and challenges have developed. So, because these are all something that ultimately the entire board, obviously needs to be involved.
And that's something that we're working on, is what does that dashboard, what does that reporting look like, and that will largely depend on the KPI work. One of the items that I've kind of tasked with the administration is, as we're going through those KPIs, let's look at how does this information get back, how does success get back to the board? What does that look like? What does the challenge look like? And so that will be part of the committee's task force as well, is to look at that.
Yes, Mr. McCall, we think your idea is brilliant because it actually affords the board members selected per specific committee to be a subject matter expert and to be at the table and literally using the data with us to determine the objectives. Of course, the work in the weeds with the strategies and the implementation and all will be our job, but when we bring it back into the boardroom to give you these updates and for you to look at the data, you will have members of the board that were at the table in the development. So it's a brilliant concept. So we appreciate
And I don't take all the credit. I think both sides came to a mutual understanding, which is,
yes,
which is
great
a
idea.
great place to be. All right.
I move approval of the 2020-2021 board goals as presented.
Second.
A motion by Dr. Harlan, a second by Mr. Stasny. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. And right along with that is the evaluation instrument for the superintendent.
Yes, sir. It's also my pleasure to facilitate this process, your review and consideration of approval for the instrument. It basically remains unchanged with the exception of the dates for the 2020-2021 school year. So I believe you have a copy of it. I'll draw your attention to the timeline on page 2. And this is showing that we're right on track so far. In September of 2020, the district board goals were reviewed and developed. So that was your called meeting that we just facilitated. October 2020, actually today, you just considered approval and took action to approve your board goals. So in December of 2020, we hope to provide you with updates with progress towards these goals, which leads us to January 2020, in which the superintendent's formative evaluation would be held.
21.
I'm sorry, 21, January 2021. So we're ready to say goodbye to 2020 for sure. And then we'll continue work towards the progress of the goals, which would put us in May, before you know it, May of 2021. At that time, we would have you take a look at this evaluation instrument and start to review the reports and the information and all the data from the year, which brings us to June. And we look to submit all the information to you for your review. We earmarked June 7th, which is a board workshop, in which if you had any questions specific to our submission, you could take care of that with the superintendent and in the workshop. And then June 14th is actually designated as the superintendent's summative evaluation day. So the rest of the document, again, it remains unchanged. So do you have any questions or any discussion?
Are you still comfortable with this timeline? Is this still?
Yes, I think so. We don't know exactly what testing will look like, but regardless of what timeline we put out there, we don't know exactly what testing is going to look like. The latest we heard last week on our TASA-TOSB, conference and such, is that they do expect that we will be tested, that there's not going to be a waiving of testing as we know it. How it works with accountability, all of those things we don't know. But as you can tell, we're plugging along and trying to keep moving, so.
Yes, barring any disruption with COVID-19 or changes from the state, we will be ready to respond regardless.
I move approval of the evaluation instrument of the superintendent as presented.
Second.
A motion by Dr. Harlan, a second by Ms. Dwayne. All in favor?
Aye. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's been approved, and at this time, we will go into closed session with both items.
Yes.
Okay. At this time, the board will now convene in closed session to discuss the following items as allowed by Texas Government Code 551.074 and 551.072. No voting will take place in the closed meeting. Any action the board wishes to take as a result of discussion in closed session will take place after the board reconvenes the open meeting. It is now 1:32.
Yeah, he's the one.
He's the one. And it's always fun to see him smile. Yeah, that's not him.
All right, pull up. The board reconvened in open session at 1:56. No action was taken in closed session. If there's no additional business or comments, then we stand adjourned.
Thank you.